Primitive Neolithic Civilizations. About 10,000 BC, the geography of the world was very similar in its general outline to that of the world of today. It is probable that by that time the great barrier across the Straits of Gibraltar, that had hitherto banked back the ocean waters from the Mediterranean valley, had been eaten through, and that the Mediterranean was a sea following much the same coastlines as it does now. The Caspian Sea was probably still far more extensive than it is at present, and it may have been continuous with the Black Sea to the north of the Caucasus Mountains. About this great Central Asian Sea, lands that are now steppes and deserts were fertile and habitable. Generally it was a moister and more fertile world. European Russia was much more a land of swamp and lake than it is now, and there may still have been a land connection between Asia and America at Bering Straits. It would have been already possible at that time to have distinguished the main racial divisions of mankind as we know them today. Across the warm temperate regions of this rather warmer and better wooded world, and along the coasts, stretched the brownish peoples of the Paleolithic culture, the ancestors of the bulk of the living inhabitants of the Mediterranean world, of the Berbers, the Egyptians, and of much of the population of South and Eastern Asia. This great race had of course a number of varieties. The Iberian or Mediterranean or dark white race of the Atlantic and Mediterranean coast, the Hamitic peoples, which include the Berbers and Egyptians, the Dravidians, the darker people of India, and multitude of East Indian people, many Polynesian races, and the Maoris, are all divisions of various value of this great main mass of humanity. Its western varieties are whiter than its eastern. In the forests of Central and Northern Europe, a more blond variety of men with blue eyes was becoming distinguishable, branching off from the main mass of brownish people, a variety which many people now speak of as the Nordic race. In the more open regions of northeastern Asia was another differentiation of this brownish humanity in the direction of a type with more oblique eyes, high cheekbones, a yellowish skin, and very straight black hair, the Mongolian peoples. In South Africa, Australia, in many tropical islands in the south of Asia, were remains of early Negroid peoples. The central parts of Africa were already a region of racial intermixture. Nearly all the colored races of Africa today seem to be blends of the brownish peoples of the north with a Negroid substratum. We have to remember that human races can all interbreed freely, and that they separate, mingle, and reunite as clouds do. Human races do not branch out like trees, with branches that never come together again. It is a thing we need to bear constantly in mind, this remingling of races at any opportunity. It will save us from many cruel delusions and prejudices if we do so. People will use such a word as race in the loosest manner, and base the most preposterous generalizations upon it. They will speak of a British race or of a European race. But nearly all the European nations are confused mixtures of brownish, dark white, white, and Mongolian elements. It was at the Neolithic phase of human development that peoples of the Mongolian breed first made their way into America. Apparently they came by way of Bering Straits and spread southward. They found caribou, the American reindeer, in the north and great herds of bison in the south. When they reached South America, there were still living the Glyptodon, a gigantic armadillo, and the Megatherium, a monstrous clumsy sloth as high as an elephant. They probably exterminated the latter beast, which was as helpless as it was big. The greater portion of these American tribes never rose above a hunting nomadic Neolithic life. They never discovered the use of iron, and their chief metal possessions were native gold and copper. But in Mexico, Yucatan, and Peru conditions existed favorable to settled cultivation, and here, about 1000 B.C. or so, arose very interesting civilizations of a parallel but different type from the Old World civilization. Like the much earlier primitive civilizations of the Old World, these communities displayed a great development of human sacrifice about the processes of seed time and harvest. But while in the Old World, as we shall see, these primary ideas were ultimately mitigated, complicated, and overlaid by others, in America they developed and were elaborated to a very high degree of intensity. These American civilized countries were essentially priest-ruled countries. Their war chiefs and rulers were under a rigorous rule of law and omen. These priests carried astronomical science to a high level of accuracy. They knew their year better than the Babylonians, of whom we shall presently tell. In Yucatan they had a kind of writing, the Maya writing, of the most curious and elaborate character. So far as we have been able to decipher it, it was used mainly for keeping the exact and complicated calendars upon which the priests expended their intelligence. The art of the Maya civilization came to a climax about 700 or 800 A.D. The sculptured work of these peoples amazes the modern observer by its great plastic power and its frequent beauty, and perplexes him by a grotesqueness and by a sort of insane conventionality and intricacy outside the circle of his ideas. There is nothing quite like it in the Old World. The nearest approach, and that is a remote one, is found in archaic Indian carvings. Everywhere there are woven feathers and serpents twine in and out. Many Maya inscriptions resemble a certain sort of elaborate drawing made by lunatics in European asylums more than any other Old World work. It is as if the Maya mind had developed upon a different line from the Old World mind, had a different twist to its ideas, was not, by Old World standards, a rational mind at all. This linking of these aberrant American civilizations to the idea of a general mental aberration finds support in their extraordinary obsession by the shedding of human blood. The Mexican civilization in particular ran blood. It offered thousands of human victims yearly. The cutting open of living victims, the tearing out of the still beating heart, was an act that dominated the minds and lives of these strange priesthoods. The public life, the national festivities, all turned on this fantastically horrible act. The ordinary existence of the common people in these communities was very like the ordinary existence of any other barbaric peasantry. Their pottery, weaving, and dyeing was very good. The Maya writing was not only carven on stone, but written and painted upon skins and the like. The European and American museums contain many enigmatical Maya manuscripts, of which at present little has been deciphered except the dates. In Peru there were beginnings of a similar writing, but they were superseded by a method of keeping records by knotting cords. A similar method of mnemonics was in use in China thousands of years ago. In the Old World before 4,000 or 5,000 B.C., that is to say, 3,000 or 4,000 years earlier, there were primitive civilizations not unlike these American civilizations based upon a temple, having a vast quantity of blood sacrifices and with an intensely astronomical priesthood. But in the Old World the primitive civilizations reacted upon one another and developed towards the conditions of our own world. In America, these primitive civilizations never progressed beyond this primitive stage. Each of them was in a little world of its own. Mexico, it seems, knew